Rico, outpost of American democracy.
The story of Puerto Rico's recovery is more complicated than you think. On September 20th, Hurricane Maria ravaged my homeland, Puerto Rico. Like the rest of the Puerto Rican diaspora, I was desperate to come home and help. At 3 months, I finally got home. We found entire towns were still without power, as were a majority of Puerto Ricans. The official death toll was 62, but various investigations placed it at over 1,000 people within the first 2 months that followed the storm. And nearly 1,000 people remained in shelters. In late November, a Washington Post analysis concluded that most U.S. media outlets picked up the Maria story only after San Juan Mayor Carmen Yulín Cruz started calling out President Trump for what she considered a slow and inefficient federal response. I met with her to understand why, despite the criticism, she chose to start that fight.
So I had a platform, and I could either use it to say that things were going well and engage in the lie, or be the echo of the voices that were telling the truth. And I will never start a fight, but I will finish them all.
We got an A+ in Texas, we got an A+ in Florida, and we may have done our best work here, but it hasn't been appreciated.
Flashlights, you don't need them anymore.
If you look at a real catastrophe like Katrina, what is your death count? 16 people versus in the thousands.
I've seen hunger, I've seen thirst, I've seen pain, I've seen people with their souls shattered, hopelessness, which is the worst kind of devastation. And I've seen the best of the human spirit. The president was trying to say something that wasn't true.
Where do you think that comes from, for the president to say that Puerto Rico is just fine, or that Puerto Ricans just want everything done for them?
I think he's misled to begin with. He doesn't have the capacity to feel empathy for people because he's never had to deal with stuff like that.
The governor of Puerto Rico, Ricardo Rosselló, estimated the damages of Maria and Irma at $94 billion. So far, the only post-Maria funds Congress has approved for Puerto Rico are $5 billion in the form of a loan, and those funds still haven't arrived.
We need to have fair treatment, equitable treatment, the same treatment that Texas or Florida would have gotten if they would have a disaster of this magnitude. We need to have that happen in Congress.
In our conversations and travels through the island, it became clear that people were most frustrated with the bureaucratic delays, accusing FEMA of hoarding supplies that people needed to survive while they figured out distribution plans, as well as other delays in providing housing assistance.
The bureaucracy is such that a city level has to make a request to FEMA state level, and the FEMA state level approves it and then sends it to the U.S. national level. So it's just so much bureaucracy.
We spoke to FEMA to understand where federal aid stands. So far, the agency has announced they've topped the $1 billion in aid to the island.
How much do you think will be needed to fulfill the needs that FEMA sees in Puerto Rico?
There are various numbers out there, but I would suspect we'll be in the 50 billion range. But again, that is just a gross estimate based on as we look at the programs into the future. And I'm not talking about into the future today or tomorrow. I'm talking about years. We are going to be committed here for a long time.
FEMA can't say that they'll stick around for long, but one of President Trump's most controversial tweets 2 weeks after the hurricane said the U.S. can't keep FEMA and the military in Puerto Rico forever. Last month, Senator Bernie Sanders introduced a $146 billion Marshall Plan of sorts for Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. It seeks to build more modern, resilient energy systems, transform multiple public sectors, promote economic development, and facilitate much-needed debt relief for the island. How optimistic are you that this Marshall Plan is going to pass in a Congress like this one, or some version of it?
It's not. It's not. But you have to fight the good fight, because it keeps the dialogue going. Maria told us, and I've said this many times, took the makeup, the veneer out of what we wanted to project. We will no longer be able to hide our inequality, our inefficiencies, our discrimination, which there is, and our poverty. Behind piña coladas, palm trees, and beautiful sandy white beach. And
to the beat of Despacito.
Yeah, everything has to be rapidito now, quickly.
Recovery for Puerto Rico is a steep uphill road because the island's economy was already in shambles. Before Maria, Puerto Rico was suffering a profound financial crisis, unable to pay off a $70+ billion debt. And to understand the debt, you have to look at what made up Puerto Rico's economy and its relation to the U.S.
The heart of the relationship is still colonial.
Irán Meléndez-Juarbe is a professor of constitutional law.
What's the simplest way that for somebody who's coming new into this conversation about Puerto Rico, would you describe is the relationship between Puerto Rico and the U.S.?
We are a non-incorporated territory of the United States. We belong to, but we're not a part of, the United States. And then we are foreign to the United States in a domestic sense. But in an international sense, we're domestic. If it sounds confusing, welcome to the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico.
The Puerto Ricans now have as much political freedom as any state in the Union, and they're working out their own economic destiny as well.
Puerto Ricans are American citizens, yes, but we can't vote in presidential elections unless we move to the states. We have no representation in Congress, although Congress has the ultimate authority over the affairs of the island. For decades, the Puerto Rican economy consisted primarily of these enclaves of American corporations that benefited from tax incentives that were created by Congress, not by Puerto Rico.
Puerto Rico, impoverished since the days of Columbus, reaches new heights of democratic progress.
In the later days of that regime, pharmaceutical companies and so on established here. The end result of that is that you develop a sort of like hollow economic model.
In the 90s, Congress began phasing out those incentives, but the island's economy had already grown around those corporations.
So that you depended so much on these companies doing business here, so that when they finally left, we were left with like a deep, a hole, right?
To fill that void, in the absence of a healthy local economy, Puerto Rico resorted to borrowing.
Bonds issued by Puerto Rico are, exempt from taxes. So that made at the time our bonds extremely attractive for bondholders, right? Because of a federal law from 1917, right, that allowed for that. We were giving an unlimited credit card, right? The fact that our economy was dependent so much on those investments, it sort of crowded out like other initiatives.
Not only were the bonds tax exempt, but paying them back was a priority established by Congress over the funding of public services in the island, which led to the deterioration of sectors like power, education, and health. The crisis propelled a mass exodus of Puerto Ricans to the U.S., with over 300,000 leaving the island since 2010, and in the months after Maria, almost another 250,000 have left. And now, under the GOP tax reform, Puerto Rico is facing yet another massive blow. The bill, as negotiated by the House and Senate, will impose a new tax on products produced by some of the remaining manufacturing companies left in the island, which, according to the governor, could threaten hundreds of thousands of jobs, up to a third of the island's tax base.
So if our economy was with pneumonia before Maria and Irma, we were intubated, and here is the U.S. government, through the Congress, unplugging the generator.
How do you expect Puerto Rico, that just sustained the worst storm in its history, to now get attacked economically in the tax bill and to recover?
We have to stand up in our own 2 feet and have very difficult dialogues that must be had if we are going to transform.
I've realized in the 15 years that I've lived outside of Puerto Rico, and the more I understand about our relationship with the U.S., that the diaspora has more power over the fate of Puerto Rico than what happens. Luis Gutierrez is not up for re-election. Have you considered running for Congress?
No, because I don't know. Change, when you're a colony, takes place where the power is, and the power is in Congress.
So yes, Puerto Ricans are American citizens, but is Congress treating those in the island as such? And will the U.S. finally let Puerto Rico rise?